As Latinos, along with others in communities of color, continue to bear the brunt of the coronavirus pandemic, CBS News seeks to tell the stories of those hurting and helping during these trying times. A new CBS News special entitled Pandemia, Latinos in Crisis, is airing on CBSN Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern. It gathers the voices of icon Dolores Huerta, as well as celebrities and activists Eva Longoria, Jose Andres, and Wilbur Valderrama. In addition, the documentary speaks with those Latinos detained by ICE, working as undocumented immigrant farm workers, and many others trying to make ends meet as dreamers. Here is a peek from Pandemia's host, Maria Elena Salinas.
Coronavirus struck the United States with a vengeance not seen in modern history.
Put this on your face.
What we're seeing now in actual real time is something that's unprecedented. This is something that we have never seen before, at least in our generation.
Healthcare workers across the country are risking their lives to save others.
We are in a crisis state. We desperately need help.
It's a war without bullets. Being covered in COVID it's walking into the hospital and feeling like every part of the hospital is a dirty zone.
The number of cases adding up, climbing exponentially. Dozens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands.
We begin tonight with breaking news, and it is dire. New models just released by the White House show as many as 240,000 people could die in the U.S. from coronavirus.
The question is how large a price we will pay. We know we will lose more. How many more will be determined by the decisions we make and the actions we take now.
Latinos are at the center of it all, in the front of long lines of unemployment.
We don't know when we're gonna go back to work and if all of us will be back.
And on the front lines of service to others, Latinos are in the crosshairs of the coronavirus.
It's clear that a majority of the new cases and a disproportionate number are coming from minority communities. 21 zip codes with the highest rate of hospitalizations, 20 have greater than average Black and or Latino populations.
In 44 states and Washington, D.C., the percentage of Latinos infected by the virus surpasses their share of the population. In 10 states, it's more than 4 times greater.
Why is it that the poorest people always pay the highest price?
As the country has shut down, reopened, and is now shutting down again amid surging cases, Latinos are once more among the most vulnerable.
And CBS News contributor Maria Elena Salinas joins me now. Welcome, Maria. Great to have you with us. So tell us what has made the coronavirus crisis in particular so difficult for Hispanic communities and families.
Well, I think it took a few months for us to realize just the impact that it was having on Latinos. We needed to have the numbers. We needed to realize who was being more impacted. And as you saw in this preview, which is sort of like an overview of what this special is, Latinos have been disproportionately affected by this virus. And there's just so many different factors. There's health factors, there's cultural factors, like the fact that many Latino families live in multi-generational households. It's difficult for them to separate. But also, and most importantly, is the fact that Latinos are the essential workers that are keeping the economy going. They are not staying home, not because it's their choice, but because they have to go to work. They can't do the types of jobs that you do from Zoom boxes and the comfort of your home. So that exposes them a lot more, of course, to this virus.
And as you mentioned, so many of these workers are considered essential to the economy and healthcare. You spoke with many of them. What did they tell you about their experience of dealing with COVID while also fearing becoming victims to it?
That is definitely something that they all fear. Like I mentioned before, they are not staying home, not because they don't want to follow the rules, but many of them, they need to pay their rent. They need to put food on the table. One of the things that this special does is just sort of like bring out the fact that the historical inequities that Latinos face as a community have been exacerbated by the pandemic. Poverty, low wages, lack of access to adequate health care, among other things, maybe not enough savings. These are the types of things that are making it more difficult for them to be able to survive this pandemic. And at the same time, they go out and work. They are the farmers, not the farmers, but the farm workers, and the grocery clerk employees, the delivery people, those who work in plants, in meat and poultry plants. So it's very difficult for them to stay home. And in those types of jobs, it's also very difficult for them to protect themselves, even if they're wearing a mask. Social distancing is very hard. So it's just so much more exposure. And it's tough for them because they know that not only can they be hurt, but at the same time, they can hurt their families when they go home.
And you have been covering this pandemic daily since it began. Why would you say it's important to watch Pandemia at this time, particularly for those of us who are currently experiencing these alarming surges of coronavirus in our communities?
I think it's the first time that we're actually focusing specifically on the Latino community. The Latino community is the largest minority in the country. 60 million Latinos live in the U.S. They are disproportionately affected by this virus. There are 18% of the population, just about 40% that have been affected by the virus. So, we go very deep into this problem. And, we have stories of disparity, inequity, but also leadership. So it's not only talking about the problems that they face, but also how they're facing them, how there are so many that are stepping up and helping them. How we have to rely sometimes, if not on the governments, on local leaders, on local politicians, but also community activists, advocates. We see leadership also in the entertainment industry. Eva Longoria, Wilmer Valderrama, among others, Chef Jose Andres, who are out there helping, not just by advocating and using their platforms to advocate and to bring light into this problem, but also looking into their pockets to see how they can help and how they can raise awareness and raise money to help some of these people pay their rent, buy food, and just be able to survive.
And, in the documentary, we also hear from educators who work with low-income and Latino families. I think the story of education and the disparity there that has become so apparent during this pandemic is such an important one to tell. What special challenges has this crisis posed for those students and their parents?
For the students, for the parents, and for the teachers, I think for everyone involved, even though many school districts have distributed computers and laptops to students, low-income students, it hasn't been all across the board. So there are many in the Latino community who might not have access to computers, to Wi-Fi. We spoke to a little boy in the beginning of this of the coverage here that had to do his homework on a cell phone. And you can imagine how difficult it is on a cell phone to do your homework, not to mention the fact that the bills are adding up and his father is unemployed due to coronavirus. So there's just a series of conflicts and of barriers. And of course, there's concern that some of these kids might be left behind. Also, there's a lot of concern right now because, the opening of the schools is inching ever closer. We're just maybe a few weeks away from the school year beginning, and there are a lot of parents that don't feel comfortable, even though they want their kids to go back to school, they don't feel comfortable sending their kids to school. They don't think it's safe for the kids. Teachers don't think it's safe for them. They don't think it's safe if the kids get sick, they can go home and maybe get the parent, the grandparent, the aunt or uncle sick. So there's definitely a lot of concern.
All right. Well, Maria Elena Salinas, thank you so much for joining us and giving us some insight into the documentary. And a programming note, you can watch the entire CBS News special, Pandemia, Latinos in Crisis, this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on CBSN.